So I'm going to try the gimmick that I tried this morning, and I'm going to ask GPT Plus.
I found this on the web.
Nope. GPT Plus. Oh, wait, I know what it is. Chat GPT Plus.
How can I help you?
I'd like you to introduce Jason Theodor to a conference of people here to learn about AI.
One sec. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Theodor, and I'm here today to talk about artificial intelligence. AI is becoming increasingly present in our everyday lives, from driverless cars to automatic translations. It is important to understand the implications of this advanced technology, both in terms of how it can benefit society and how it can also challenge our fundamental values. Today, I'm going to discuss the potential of AI to enhance businesses, further scientific progress, and revolutionize entire industries. I'm looking forward to a stimulating conversation.
Okay, so not exactly true, but apparently she wants to present something completely different, which maybe she'll get to at our next event. So today I'm going to introduce myself. I'll do that inside the actual presentation. I want to talk to you about creativity and some of the distilled ideas and research that I've had around creativity for quite some time. The old title, before I had a long-winded conversation with ChatGPT-4 about my presentation title, it used to be called Prompting Powers: How to Enhance Creativity with AI, but the AI thought that was a little stale, so we've changed it to the creative algorithm. Essentially, I'm going to talk about three things that are related to creativity. That's how to do more, how to think better, and how to be different, with or without AI. So my name is Jason Theodor. My friends call me JTED, and my enemies call me Jason the Odor. I am an executive director of creativity, strategy, and experience design. I'm a creative consultant, and I run a company called morebetterdifferent.org. And that's actually where you can find this presentation. So I'm going to go through a lot of information today, and I'm going to show some pretty detailed examples of a couple of things. You can find all of that at morebetterdifferent.org. There's a link there to the creative algorithm presentation, so you don't even have to take notes if you don't want to. You can be as relaxed as you wish. So I've been obsessed with creativity pretty much since I was a kid. But in terms of career, I became a creative director in and around 2005, and I watched the people around me very closely. And I noticed, to nobody's surprise, that we are all creative in slightly different ways. So I wanted to really, over decades really, I wanted to explore that. And I wanted to come up with a definition or an ability to distill creativity down to its sort of core component parts, almost like the quantum physics of the creative world, and boil it down to its simplest attributes. So basically, I was searching for the creative algorithm, and I'm going to share what I learned with you today. But before I reveal the elements, I just wanted to say that this needs to be enhanced by, or will be affected by, AI. The AI right now is finding its zeitgeist. We are right on the edge of that curve where we're about to accelerate at a rate where we will need to put on a seatbelt. It's a moment that McKinsey is calling AI spring. It's arrived. It's now. Bill Gates says that AI is the most revolutionary tech since the graphical user interface. and the age of AI has begun. And as I mentioned really, really early on, at the beginning of the day, things are accelerating so fast, it's almost hard to keep up with the tools and even just the announcements. Every single day there's something new, and something new is being connected to something else. So what I want to propose is using AI as an assistant coach. And there's a slash between those things, because in a way it can act as an assistant, it can do some things for you, it can help you out with sort of more of the remedial tasks. But as a coach, the most interesting way to use AI for me right now is for AI to start asking me questions so that I can better understand myself, so I can better understand the work that I'm doing, my values, etc., which is almost strange and ironic. So while AI can do your work without effort, in many ways, I believe that this homogeneous expression of AI that we see all around us is going to start becoming tedious and boring to people that aren't paying attention, that aren't actually taking their own individual perspective and talent and skills and tweaking it in a way that makes it meaningful and interesting. Because if an AI writes a novel, is that going to make it an interesting or great novel for you? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Humans crave meaning. So for now, while AI is nascent, we can use it to augment our own abilities to create more, better, and different work. So let's get into what creativity is. To me, I say this is an amalgam, again, of countless perspectives on creativity, from comedians to chefs to business leaders and writers and neuroscientists and inventors, all of whom I've looked at and studied in their definitions. For me, creativity is the act of connecting things in exceptional ways. And scientists sometimes refer to this as the production of effective novelty, which doesn't quite sound as poetic, but they're scientists. I've always toggled back and forth on the idea that creativity is innate. Are some people simply born more creative than other people? Obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. I think that creativity is made up of many different attributes. Like any human, some will come more naturally to you, and some you'll be more inclined to, and others you won't. But generally, the more you put in, the more you'll get out. And the same is true for AI. I like the idea that creativity is a drive, that it's a force, that it's an action. And that comes to the first element of creativity, this idea of action. As Brenda Euland once said, if you want to be a writer, you have to write. I mean, now I guess you could ask ChatGPT to write it for you, but is that really being a writer? You have to do something. You have to act. You have to create. The act of creation. Also a fantastic book by Rick Rubin. So let's examine this drive, this force, this way of operating. Action results in more stuff being created. One of the biggest problems about this idea of action is that there's this powerful force that likes to pump the brakes on your momentum, that actually enjoys building up inertia. And Stephen Pressfield calls this the resistance in his wonderful book called The War of Art. It pushes back generally in proportion to how important your work is, almost like a natural law. And procrastination becomes one of our first hurdles in creating. So where does Henry Wirtz come in? Well, he was a Confederate Army officer around 1864, and he had this brilliant idea. They didn't really have a place to put their prisoners. They didn't really have a great jail, so what he did was he just drew a circle in the dirt around the people and said, if you cross this line, we'll kill you. So that's kind of an infamous creator of the idea of deadline, but that concept of a deadline was eventually picked up by journalists and people that had to do creative work, and they started calling it a deadline because they felt like if they didn't finish something on time, they would die. So deadlines are actually a really powerful way to trick the brain. You create this false sense of urgency because it's not really life or death, but you still convince yourself that this urgency exists. And just that simple act of setting a deadline of any kind pushes you to act, and it starts to create momentum. A developer and entrepreneur, Francesco Cirillo, created the Pomodoro technique. How many of you have heard of or use Pomodoro? So, okay, just about everybody. It's fascinating, and we all probably tweak it in our own ways, but I like to say, I worked on this presentation for 7 tomatoes today. Usually it's never 7. Usually it's 1, and then I go and eat an ice cream bar and watch some YouTube. But essentially, Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. It's called that because, number one, it sounds cool, and number two, the inventor had one of those little kitchen timers in his apartment that looked like a tomato. So he would turn it to 25 minutes, and he found out that creating these short bursts of focus did wonders to kind of overcome distraction. We call them work-rest blocks. So you get a little reward after you've done your 1 tomato. You get 5 minutes to look at your phone or check your email. Using that as a basis, using the idea of deadlines and a time limit and the sense of urgency, I came up with this concept. This is not a brilliant concept by any stretch. I called it 10 ideas in 10 minutes. So 10 and 10. And I would use this with my teams, and we would sit down. And anytime we had an idea or a thought that we needed to process, especially when we wanted to get into action and create momentum, we would essentially say there's 2 rules. You're not allowed to censor yourself or stop. You write down any idea, no matter how good, bad, or ugly that idea is. And you have to have 10 things before the timer runs out. And it's a multiple. So if you have 3 people, you have to have 30 ideas in 10 minutes. So why? I mean, that's fun, that's cool, but why does it matter? Why not just come up with 1 good idea? Why do we need multiple ideas? So Thomas Edison says creativity is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. By the way, these are all created with Midjourney 5. A lot of these people don't look like this, but they look cool. I wanted it in the colors of my presentation, so I asked it to shine magenta, cyan, and yellow lights on their faces, and I asked it to use the most expensive Zeiss lens that's available for portrait photography. It cost me almost nothing. Actually, he said genius is 1% inspiration, but I used some poetic license, change it to creativity for my narrative because it fits it better. But essentially, this guy, how many attempts do you think? So, first off, he didn't invent the light bulb. He perfected the light bulb. He was working on the light bulb. But just throw out a guess as to how many elements he went through and tested to find out what was the best filament that would conduct electricity and provide light. That, we'll get to that. It was so it was 2,774 for the light bulb, but then, did you know he also invented the battery? I mean, he didn't invent the battery, but he perfected the battery. Again, he conducted over 9,000 experiments, essentially, to figure out what were the best components. So this guy was tenacious, okay? He spent 6 months working on, eventually settling on the nickel iron battery, which we still all use. They called it the Edison battery. A reporter said to him when he was working in his lab, "Isn't it a shame that with the tremendous amount of work you've done that you haven't been able to get any results?" And he replied, Results, why? Man, I have gotten lots of results. I know several thousand things that won't work. And I think that that is crucial to creativity. The idea that it's important that we don't stop. It's important that we keep looking, even when we found a good answer. We look for a better answer. So I call this the law of 1% in honor of Edison. It's essentially a design to get the most creativity out of our own work. Here's a very unscientific chart or example, infographic that shows how you might come up with, so if you start from the top down, you might come up with one good idea right off the bat, and then you might come up with some okay ideas and a couple other good ideas, and then some bad ideas, and then we'll get to this a bit later, but I really think it's important that you push through as many bad ideas as you can, sometimes purposefully. But it takes many, many tries to get, and a lot of bad ideas, to actually push through to get greatness. Now, what you don't do, as you can see, greatness, the star, isn't at the bottom. It's not at the end. You might discover it somewhere in the middle, like Edison did with light filaments. He tested 700 and whatever things. He didn't come up with bamboo, carbonized bamboo, at the end of those 700 and whatever it was. It was somewhere in the middle. But he kept going and kept testing and kept trying different things to see if he could find out if it was actually the best idea. So that's the idea of pushing for quantity. And now, how many of you have heard of the study of the ceramics teacher that divided the class in two and asked one half of the class to, basically their job was to create 50 pounds of pots. And the other half of the class, that was to get an A. You get an A in this class if you created 50 pounds of material. And the other class, you only have to create one pot. It just has to be a great, perfect pot. So in this study, the team or the group that was asked to focus on quantity were the ones that got the best results. Now, it's a great story. It's also not true. It's a myth. It was from a book called Art and Fear, Observations on the Perils and Rewards of Art Making, and it was created by David Bales and Ted Orland. And the reason that the story has been mythologized because they were photographers, and they had a photography teacher that did that to them. Now, it wasn't obviously the weight of the photographs that they took, but the number, the quantity. Instead of focusing on trying to get one perfect photograph, focus on going for as many photographs as you can. It's something that most famous photographers do. Annie Leibovitz is a great example. She talks about taking thousands of photographs to get that one perfect portrait of somebody. So whether it's true or not, whether it's a myth or not, myths still have truth within them. And we need to be able to push through the quantity to make mistakes, to iterate, to improve. If we just focus on perfectionism, we don't learn a whole lot. So I went through many titles for this talk before I finally settled on the creative algorithm. So I'd call this Prompting Powers, How to Enhance Creativity with AI. It's really, really easy to go for mass quantity for an idea using ChatGPT. So you can just say, give me 20, give me 200, give me 5,000. It won't stop. You can keep saying continue. I mean, basically the only limit is the amount of time, energy you have. And I guess GPT sometimes has a cutoff and it says, I don't want to talk about that anymore because it's making me feel insane. And then you have to start over. But other than that, you can do a lot. Also, done is better than great. So here, ChatGPT gave me a bunch of titles. To be honest, most of them were kind of crap. They were pretty generic. But the point of them being bad was that it actually pushed me through to an idea that I thought was better. So due diligence, don't get too lazy. And here's the thing, AI will not make you lazy, it will make you crazy, because instead of judging, the 2 or 3 or 4 ideas that you come up with yourself, now you can look at 100 ideas, 1,000 ideas. So I call it like the 10 ideas in 10 milliseconds, or 1,000 ideas in 1 millisecond. And we know that just from the paper that was released by OpenAI, that ChatGPT creates quantity just in and of itself. The idea that somebody can take a knowledge task and their second performance, or their second time around doing a task, they're already twice as fast using ChatGPT or GPT-3, I think it was, or 3.5, as an accelerant, as a way of augmenting their ability. So quantity, that's what we're talking about here. Action, the act of creation. You want to make as many things as you can. It's really, really tough in the beginning sometimes, because you're jumping that gap between 0 and 1, between having nothing and turning that into something. That's tough. But AI can help you with that. An example is my son, who plays guitar, and he spent years just learning other people's songs, and I asked him once how come he never wrote music, and he kind of shrugged like a teenager does. And then I showed him ChatGPT, and I showed him that I had used it for something. I wrote a poem, which was hilarious and kind of stupid. And I think less than a week later, he came back and he had a song that he had written. And I asked him, why are you writing songs all of a sudden? He said, well, I tried this ChatGPT. Well, the problem that I always had was that I want to sing. I want to sing lyrics, but I don't want to write the lyrics. So if I'm trying to write a song, I don't have lyrics, but I could just ask ChatGPT to create lyrics for me, and I could go from there. Now I had the lyrics, I could write the song, and then I could change the lyrics afterwards. But I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's a really cool application of being able to go and jump that gap from 0 to 1 and make something from nothing, because you actually had some assistance. So as you can see, creativity can actually become a virtuous cycle. So the fact of creating all that quantity from the myth of the pottery teacher, that quantity leads to quality just almost on its own. And I want to talk about quality next. Just the sheer volume allows you to select the best. Again, not a real picture. Creepy Steve. So on Steve Jobs' famous return to Apple, he sat down with Wired magazine in 1994, which is when the web basically was starting. And he said, creativity is just connecting things. And in my mind, that's like, yes, connecting the world's credit cards to the App Store, but that's another story. Steve didn't invent the App Store, but he did conceive of the Apple ecosystem, the idea that things are connected. And he, through his vision, Apple's beautiful walled garden is one of the best connected things there are, with Sidecar and AirDrop and universal control. So let's talk about the second element of creativity, connecting things. So remember, creativity is the act of connecting things in exceptional ways. So how do we make things better? We make things better through connection. The shadow side of connection is that there's an infinite amount of things. So, perfectionism can stop us not just from starting something because we're going to do it wrong, but it can prevent us from finishing something because it's not quite there, it's not quite done. I could learn more, I could do more, I could find out more about this, I could work harder, and that fear of doing something wrong and of going down the wrong path is very real. But at the same time, when you are looking down into the void of infinity, especially on the internet or even with some of these AI tools, it's important for us to understand how to set boundaries, whether those boundaries are limits on our time, the amount of time that we're going to spend, how deep and how wide we want to explore this subject, because we could honestly go on forever. So that's where the idea of the T-shape, you've probably heard this term before, but the idea of going wide, having a breadth of knowledge and going deep, having a depth of knowledge, the difference between expertise and discipline in a field, an expert versus a generalist. One way to explore connections is through building mind maps, where I call this connect the thoughts. And you take one of your core ideas, you put it in the center, and you basically create a bunch of spokes. That's the breadth of your knowledge. Like, what relates to this particular idea? And then how many nodes you can create from those spokes, how many other items are connected to that becomes the depth. And you can start to look at your own ideas and how and what the limitations of your own ideas are. But you can also explore how different concepts are related. You can play with some of the weird ideas that show up on the fringes. And I'll just give you an example of how ChatGPT can actually help you with that. I did not expect this to happen, but I said create a detailed mind map of the term rabbit hole and include 20 nodes. And it gave me this. This is GPT Pro, which uses 4, which actually built code that created a mind map for me, which I thought was really cool. You can do this. You can also ask it to create nodes with branches and then present an organized, numbered, nested list, and it'll just give you this nice list, which is kind of an incredible thing when you want to explore a subject and you ask it to. I didn't expect QAnon to show up on here, but it did. That's a rabbit hole. That's what rabbit holes are. So let's talk a little bit more about connections. Connections can really only be made if you get good at asking questions. And Stanford professor Tina Seelig, also that doesn't look anything like her, but she lectures around the world on creativity, and she coined the term framestorming. And framestorming is about reframing and understanding what the power of questions, which I'll get into in a second. But one of her key things in her talk is she says that if you ask somebody the question of what is 5 plus 5, there's only one answer, and that's 10. But if you ask it in a different way, if you say, what plus what equals 10, now you have an infinite number of answers that could be applied. So I thought that was an interesting way of approaching it, of approaching any issue or problem. So this is a tool that's taken from or stolen from design thinking, but the how might we exercise is a great way to explore the questions and how you ask those questions. If you're curious, it affects the quality of your output based on the quality of your answers. So how might we? Let's get into that. How might we, the actual word how sparks up your brain because it's a question. How? How are we going to do this? How might opens up possibilities because it's not locked down, it's not written in stone. It's how might we, and then we is inclusive, and it doesn't put all the pressure on you. It basically takes it out to the group. So how might we is great. But I want to quickly go through, this is one prompt that I wrote, and again, it's on morebetterDifferent.org. But this prompt, I asked it, I said, you are my creative assistant. It's very effective to tell ChatGPT what it is instead of asking it. So say, you are my creative assistant who will help me write a how might we challenge statement. And these statements include something I want to change or accomplish, who it is for, and the benefit of making that change or accomplishment. and then I give an example of a good how might we challenge statement, and I say, first, prompt me with the first of 5 questions you will need to ask me to complete this task, then stop, wait for my answer before continuing with the next question. Repeat this until all 5 questions have been answered. And finally, after I have answered the 5th and final question, incorporate my answers in a concise HMW challenge statement. Try to keep it open and positive. Try not to present a solution within the statement itself. Well, that's a lot. That's a lot. But it works. It works in a fantastic way. It's great. Let's get started. It asks me a pertinent question. What's the main issue or challenge? I said, I want to publish my speaker slides and notes. It says, who is this for? I said, well, I think, or no, who is the target? I said, it's for people who attend my talk in person, want to refer back to the slides. What's the benefit? And we went on and had a conversation. And in the end, it said, this is your how might we statement. How might we provide an online platform for attendees of my talks to access and explore speaker slides and notes, enabling them to dive deeper into the concepts, explore and exercises presented, and empowering them to cultivate their own creativity and contribute to society in a new and meaningful way. So all of a sudden it's like, wow, lofty. So that was my goal. I'm probably going to go over, not over time, but I'm probably going to just mow through the Q&A, and maybe you can talk to me afterwards if you have some questions, because I want to blaze through this entire presentation. How much time do I actually have? 12 more minutes? Perfect. Of Q&A? Yeah. Okay. That's good. I'm already blowing through the Q&A. Question formula technique I'm not going to go into because it's really complicated. Oh, it's not complicated. It's just a lot of work, but it's all on the website. But it's essentially a way of asking questions. The question formulation technique, QFT, is from a book called Make Just One Change, and it's created by educators to teach students how to empower themselves. But essentially, you ask all the questions. You have to ask at least 50 questions. There's no solving of those questions. There's no judging. There's no editing the questions. Then you refine the questions by opening and closing the questions. And then finally, by judging the answers. It's a really, really beautiful tool that I highly suggest you check out. So quality, by continuously diving deep and going broad, being curious and asking the right questions, we can come to a better quality piece of work that we're trying to achieve. And interestingly enough, the wider and deeper that you go can lead to connections that are novel. It can lead to things that you hadn't thought of before, and that haven't been made before. And that's how focusing on quality can actually start to push your work into uniqueness, which is the next thing that we're going to talk about in 10 minutes. So almost no one in the world is more unique than Chef Ferran Adria. Again, he doesn't look anything like this. But he was a Spanish chef in the 2000s. He had the best restaurant in the world 5 times over. It was the same restaurant. El Bulli. He just won best restaurant 5 times. And he was a pioneer of molecular gastronomy. And he experimented with all sorts of techniques and ingredients to produce novel dishes that challenged and delighted the senses. He was inspired by another chef called Jacques Maximin at a conference in '87 where that chef said, creativity means not copying, and he totally took that to heart. He's like, it's about food. I don't want to copy recipes. I want to create something that's absolutely novel and completely different. So he created the liquid olive that pops in your mouth like a bubble. He created dishes that made entirely of foam. He made spoons that had, he basically created his own cutlery. One of the spoons has a little clip on it that you put an aromatic herb, and then when you're eating the soup, the smell of that herb affects the taste, which is incredible. So, exceptional ways. If creativity is the act of connecting things in exceptional ways, what does that mean, to be different? What does it mean to be novel? You want to be an outlier, but not an alien. And so for this example, Virgil Abloh, he was a fashion designer, and he talked about the 3% rule. and he said that you can just tweak something by 3%. The notion that to sell something familiar to you, if you want to sell something familiar, you need to make it surprising. So, a pair of sneakers, how do I make that pair of sneakers surprising? But to sell something surprising, you also need to make it familiar. And he said you only really need to change about 3% to generate a cultural contribution that's deemed innovation. So whether you're, playing with 3% or 97%, you want something that stands out, but also stands in. It's something that people can relate to and understand. I don't know about you, but I'm very familiar with imposter syndrome. The idea, that is this really going to be accepted by other people? Our brains often use the idea of comparison. Someone once said that comparison is the theft of joy or happiness, which is, you're comparing yourself to other people and other ideas, and there's an infinite amount of them, and you seem really small, and maybe you're just not good enough. Well, there's a way to play with that. And one of the I don't know what to call him. He was an icon in the idea of creative thinking, Edward de Bono, and he essentially invented the concept of lateral thinking. And lateral thinking is where you honestly basically borrow a brain that you don't have. And he has some fantastic exercises for that, which we'll go through in literally a minute. One is, I call this a self-destruct button, but essentially it's problem reversal. So you try to think of what would destroy this project, what would wreck this project, what would ruin you, what would be the most ultimate disaster. And when you write that down and brainstorm in that fashion, you actually start to create solutions and understand that there might be a better way of actually doing it right. The second, and this is my favorite exercise of all, so if you take one thing from today, this is it, random word. Pick a random word. It has to be an object. It can be anything. It can be something in this room, say the clock. What are 3 attributes of that object? And now take those 3 attributes and apply them to the thing that you're thinking about. It's not something your brain would ever do naturally. It's not something your brain would ever do normally. So here's you can read this on morebetterdifferent.org. But this works really well, this prompt. And it's long. Again, I'm going to read it. You are my creative assistant. Again, tell it what it is. Who will help me improve my existing idea. First, prompt me for my idea for a product, service, or project. Then stop and let me tell you what it is. Next, come up with an interesting, random word, preferably a non-obvious noun, and ask me if that noun is okay. If yes, then continue. If no, then come up with a different random word and ask again. Next, list and describe 3 attributes related to this random word. Then, one by one, explain how each attribute might be applied to the idea. Use both abstract and direct associations to find the best way to expand on the existing idea. Describe the context and give specific examples and commentary in your answers. It's insane what it comes up with. I've thrown so many crazy ideas at it. So this is just one example from this morning. Sure, I'd be happy to help you improve your idea. What is your idea for a product, service, or project? That's me trying to sound like ChatGPT. I said, I'd like to create an AI chatbot that people can text to when they just want to bitch about their day and have someone listen. And it says, interesting idea. Before we get started, let me give you a random noun, sundial. Is that okay for you to work with, or would you like another word? And I said, that's perfect. And it says, great, here are 3 attributes related to sundial: time, sunlight, and precision. And then, wow, I don't know if I even have time to read all of this, but essentially it says, like, time, a chatbot that listens to people's complaints. Actually, I'll just read the last paragraph. You can check this out online too, but by combining these attributes, the chatbot could be designed to be an efficient and effective listener, encouraging users to express themselves, providing support, and helping them to feel better about their day. For example, the bot could start by asking users to describe their day, and then using precision identify the key issues that cause stress or frustration. The bot could then provide relevant tips and suggestions to help users deal with those issues. Finally, using positivity, the bot could end the conversation by asking users to focus on the positive aspects of their day and encourage them to have a better day tomorrow. And I was like, kind of blown away by that. So uniqueness. Being able to do this random word, break through the grooves that your brain makes. You tend to think in the same ways over and over again. This is just one way to create uniqueness and build up an exception. So, interestingly enough, playing with uniqueness and coming up with novel concepts actually gets people motivated to follow your path and start to build momentum for others, where they start getting into creating more. And you get this nice virtuous cycle between quantity, quality, and uniqueness. So to sum up, to do more, quantity. Try to break your inertia, build some momentum with false deadlines or 10 and 10 or the law of 1%. To think better, quality. Try reframing your challenge with how might we or question formulation technique or mind mapping. To be different, uniqueness, try on a new brain. Use a default detour like the self-destruct button or random word. So to wrap up, creativity is the act of connecting things in exceptional ways, and the creative algorithm can be expressed in 3 simple words: more, better, different, which is the name of my company, morebetterdifferent.com. Thank you so much for listening, and if you have questions, come to me. I'll be here for a bit after, but I think I've gone over.